Okay, thank you. Hello to everyone. Please join your palms, bow. The four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Welcome to you all. Some of you, it's very early in the morning. Some of you, it's even more earlier in the morning, 4 a.m. And some of you, 6 a.m. or 9 a.m. And some of you about ready to go to bed. And then Rick, what time are you at? I have no idea what Philippine time is. Oh, he's muted. But it's very good to see you.
Thank you. Same here.
What time is it over there?
It's 9 a.m.
This is a man that's retired. He doesn't know what time it is.
He's here, Gilbert.
Huh?
He's here.
Yeah.
No, he's in California.
I'm back here.
You're back.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago.
Wow. Okay. Well, good. Good to see you. All right. Rick is my longest standing senior student, so I'm very happy to see him when the prodigal father returns. Okay. We're going to talk about mind. We've been talking about mind for quite a bit, and we get to some sticky issues when we talk about mind, and we talk about self. And even if you look at the Mighty Network, the Mind Work Forum, I've been kind of laying out some chant traps there in terms of what self is, or what it isn't, or is it, or is it not. And it requires a contemplation because there's no direct answer, no easy way to say it. The moment that you try to conceptualize about it, you create a condition that cannot be self. The only thing you can prove is what it is not. But even that is not satisfactory, because even trying to prove that the self is not self, it is contradictory, because even the notion of a self is something that is created by the mind. And this is the part that's very, very difficult for us to really get to, because we want to try to polish our idea of the self so that we can understand it. And then we get the sutras that say it's just not other than just this mind that you're using right now. So it's not very easy for us to say that, well, if it's this mind that we're using, then why not self? And a word in terms of the definition of mind is the self nature of mind. So it isn't necessarily that we eliminate self, but we utilize self without the sense of self, without the sense of a separate self or a duality or object and subject. And this is the part that's very difficult for us to do. And it really puts you right at the doorway to Chan, that we have to stay right there and look at it and understand that this very mind is mind, which is the self nature of mind. But what is the self? And perhaps it's because when we look at the idea of self, we have a particular notion about it as to what self is. And so we have this notion that there is this consciousness that's there. And And if you look at the Lankavatara Sutra or any sutras, they'll say that consciousness is not other than mine. You go, aha, then I think, therefore I am, so this is my true mind. And then we get to the Shurangama Sutra, and where the Buddha finally yells at Ananda, Ananda, that's not your mind. And then you just go, well, what is my mind? What is myself? What part of this is real and what part of it is not real? And yes. What do you mean, yes? Yes, it is in this way. But you go, that doesn't make any sense. From that side, it doesn't make sense. So it's not easy for us to do this, to give up this notion, because what we want to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mentioned this many times. It's kind of funny, in the ancient days, the people that got to bathe first was the grandpa and grandma, and then the parents, and then the kids, and the last one was the baby. So the babies were the last ones that got into the warm water. By then, I imagine it's probably cold, but that's where they come up with the story saying, well, we'll just throw the baby out with the bath water because that's the last one, and it's pretty stinky anyway. But that's kind of how we approach the idea of mind. We want to throw this mind out. We want to throw out this consciousness, but we can't do it because we use it. But then who is the we that uses it? And this is where words really fail. And I'll tell you, words fail when you read the sutras. A lot of times they don't seem to make sense from this side, because the words appear to be contradictory, and they appear to take you from one point to another. But then along the way, they will do things like in the Lankavatara Sutra, which they'll negate that these things are mine. But in the very next line, it'll say precisely that this is mine. And you go, wait, you can't have it both ways. And then they say, yes. Yes, what? Yes. You mean you can't have it both ways? Well, then which way is the real way and which way is not? This is something that I'm taking you to, where we had talked about before. This part is not easy, no, to talk about. It is not something that you look at it and you go, okay, you're at the mall and you look at the little diagram of the map of the layout of the mall, and it says you are here. And so are you really there? When the sutras talk about there's no abiding, then you go, no, you're not abiding, but they just say in this present moment, but then they negate time altogether. So how is this working? I'm not here to tell you, oh, you know what? I'm going to explain this to you. By me explaining to you just takes you further away from it. But this is, you really have to work on this part. This part is where the mind does not easily reveal the esoteric aspect of it. All the stuff I've been telling you is correct. It's correct in the basic, it's correct in the profound understanding, but in the esoteric, it's irrelevant. You go, what do you mean it's irrelevant? Because mind is mind. There's that suchness to it. When we try to start dividing it up, it doesn't work that way. When we try to say this is on this side and this is on that side, if we say this is conditioned and this is unconditioned, does that make two minds, or does that make a false mind and a real mind? No. When we talk about, and this is something that I always had Rick say, and one of his first revelations was to know the arising mind as the non-arising mind. It is not two separate minds. The arising mind is mind as well. That which is illusory, transitory, it too is mind. it too is created by the mind. But then we go, we're getting a little closer, but not really, because the moment we try to grasp for it, we miss it. We know that this is what the sutras are saying. And if you look at the sutras and you look at the stuff, you'll see that they're all saying the same thing, but it appears to be confusing unless you apply it, unless you practice it. In my notes, I was talking about these terms, wu nian or wu wei, and no thought, and non-conceptual wakefulness. So wu nian was really advanced by Hui Ning and the Platform Sutra. This non-conceptual wakefulness is from the Dharmata Vibhaga Sutra, a very high-level sutra. But it's the same thing. It is just that one is awake, and then we have to stop. What one are you talking about? Good question, because that's where the words start tying you up and you miss that. So sometimes you'll see in my writings, I'll put one, but with quote marks around it to say, I'm saying this, but I'm not really meaning that about the one, because the one, we have to find out where that returns to, this idea, because the one is conceptual. If mind is beyond conception, then there's nothing that returns to anything. How could it possibly be that way? Everything is precisely in its way, perfectly in its way. But it's not so easy for us to understand that. You who are listening, you are very lucky to listen to this, very fortunate, because you have an opportunity to go through that door that people don't even know is there. They're just simply out there polishing the tile to make it a mirror. But when we really seriously start probing this, it changes everything. And when you read the sutras, then they begin to make sense. We talked about maintaining the clear awareness of the true mind. Maintaining the clear awareness of the true mind is not conceptual. Once we start trying to conceptualize what that means, we miss it. We try to explain it or understand it, we miss it. Maintaining this clear awareness of the true mind is practice. It is what we do. Standing at the portals of Chan is one thing. To enter, one must practice. And again, who's the one? Who's the one that we're talking about here? Mind. Oh, I see, the one is mind. No, it's not that way. But you just said the one is mind, but not in the conceptually. Mind is just mind. When we allow the mind just to be mind, non-conceptual wakefulness, we no longer define mind by its environment. The environment is defined by mind. Everything that we see when we're looking around, everything is precisely there because it was created by mind. It was brought forth in mind. It is the substance of mind. This is not easy for us to do. And simply saying that, if I could only bring you to a realization by saying that, that would be great. But it doesn't work that way. Those who go beyond, those who see the esoteric, they're the ones that sincerely put this into practice. And when you see people, even if they're still have some messed up views, I'm not talking about you, Robert, but he tries hard. And that's why I respect him. David's a new one, but he tries. And they really try to do this. And little by little, it gets stronger. And they're worthy of me correcting them and doing this, because they're brooming every day, sweep, trying to get this. And little by little, there won't be much of a foundation for them to stand upon when everything is just simply perfectly in its place. It will happen. But they sincerely practice in a way to do this, rather than looking for that perfect quote, that perfect thing that says, that aha moment. There's not an aha moment to the self. The self is illusory. But you just said the self nature of mind is real. The true mind, yes. But it is not as you think it is. That's why in the Shurangama Sutra, the Buddha took such great pains to correct Ananda's misunderstanding that this is not a perfected consciousness of mind. The Lankavatara Sutra goes a long way towards dispelling this with its approach with the Yogacara school, and talking about that everything is consciousness only. But consciousness only in and of itself produces some problematic conceptions within it if one clings to the idea of consciousness or a separate consciousness or a duality that is there. It is the opposite in the Yogacara school, saying if everything is consciousness, this consciousness is mine, not that which appears on it, yet it is also mine, but it has no separate existence, no foundation whatsoever. The only foundation, the only platform is mind itself. This is not a concept. This is not the one. It is what the one returns to. But yet even saying that doesn't make sense, because it's never left. The whole idea of an awakening is realizing there's no one to awaken. It's always been there. And my ideas, even my idea of being awakened, is fallacious. It's false. It's illusory. There's no one to awaken, because the Buddha mind has always been there, clear. Yet we have all of this, what sometimes in the Nikayas they call dross, dross as apart from the gold or the silver, this dross that's on there that isn't really the substance of the true mind. But even that doesn't make any sense, because that dross is also mine. We cannot separate it like that. Otherwise, it would be a duality. So these kinds of analogies and metaphors, especially in the Nikayas, can only take you so far. It is why in the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutras and the Tathagatagarbha Sutras, great pains were made to try to distinguish this and try to say, there is this Buddha nature, which is the self nature of mind. When we see things in this way, it's different. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings of self nature. I vow to cut off endless vexations of self nature, to practice limitless approaches to Dharma of self nature, to attain supreme Buddhahood of self nature. It's already there. it is a dream puppet that is seeking some deliverance, grasping at attainment. There is no attainment. There is no wisdom. It's all mine. But it's difficult for us to understand that. And if you tell people, it's not easy for them to be able to probe that. It's hard. It's very, very hard for us to probe these kinds of things. But we have to challenge ourselves. That's why we read the sutras, and slogging through the Lankavatara Sutra, it's difficult. I mean, the Lanka doesn't give up its riches very easily. You know, even if you don't understand the Diamond Sutra, you can understand the words. But if you're reading the Lanka, you're going like, what? You just keep saying what, because you're looking at it and going, what part of this is mine? And then there was a statement saying the triple realm is an empty apparition. The triple realm being desire realm, form realm, and no form realm, is an empty apparition, meaning it's empty. It's a phantasm or a ghost created by individual mind. Wow. Now let's stop for a second, because they're saying, wait a minute, created by the individual mind. And then you scratch your head and say, well, wait a second, what the heck is that? If they're talking about creating it by the individual mind, how can we reconcile that with saying that there is no individual, there is no self? The Buddha didn't say no self. He said not self. This is important for you to work at, is that it's not self, but it's created by the individual mind, but it's not separate from mind. It is this very mind, but it gives us a clue as to how we approach, how we're going to practice, how we're going to look at this. It's not easy, but we have to take it with our heart. Ergo, the Heart Sutra, we have to practice with our heart. When we sit to meditate, and by the way, I'm going to be going to Washington very soon, and this is kind of a prequel to all the stuff that I'm going to be talking about there, especially because they're going to be there and they're going to be sitting on the cushions, and I don't want them to be wasting their time there. But I'm going to redirect this towards the meditation and the practice itself, our moment-to-moment practice. This is where these contradictions or apparent contradictions are reconciled. They're not talking out of both sides of their mouth. In samsara they are, but as one practices, what appears to be a contradiction is reconciled, but it's not easy. Because if we talked about this and make an argument about it, then we essentially, are arguing out of samsara, but not out of mind. And that's different. The mind, everything is just perfectly in its place. So if it has an argument with somebody, it could easily say you win, and the person would go, see, I was right. Yes, you're right. And it wouldn't make a difference. One would still pass blessings to that person and transfer merit in hopes that one day the cataracts would be removed from their eyes, but that person would still seem like they were right. Now, Shifu had this quote, it is not the flash of experience that fades, but the power derived from the experience which fades. So if one has an experience, some tiny realization, or it could be a great realization, that experience, as we move away from it, appears to fade. But it isn't that that experience fades. We can still remember it, but we can't remember how we got there. We can't remember that it was our sincere practice that brought us to this moment where we can have this profound experience. It is why they always talk about the generation of the practice. The practice is something that you have to put an effort into. If you weren't connected to a power grid and you wanted to have lights and you didn't have a solar panel, you'd have to turn a crank that had something there to turn this generator to make the light appear. It would not be a switch. You'd have to put the effort in to make the light appear. And so, so that's important. I used to see that always in the war movies. They're there, and the Philippine people were moving the generator to power the radio, to communicate with other forces, but they had to always keep moving in order to generate. If you stop doing it, then you lose the contact. And that's the same thing with the with our experience and our practice is that we have to keep generating the practice. Once we stop generating the practice, we fall back into samsara. But we can be within samsara and yet generate this power. And here's an interesting byproduct to it. Because it generates what appears to be wisdom, although we'd say that it's not really wisdom, this wisdom enables us to more safely navigate in samsara, making better choices via the wisdom. Even though this wisdom has not arisen to a complete awakening, it's still generating wisdom, making your life easier, making your choices easier in terms of your life. And it's kind of giving you, I'm not a golfer, but analogy would be like a life caddy that is telling you, okay, I think you better not say this. Maybe you want to do this or whatever. That's helping you along the way. It's your very mind wisdom that's doing that. The more you have faith in that, the more you generate it, the clearer everything gets. It is when we're not generating obstructions, then we're generating a clarity in the mind. And that's what's important. What good is it for you to sit in meditation if you're generating obstructions when you're sitting? But people do that all the time, and they expect a different result. What kind of a result do they expect? It doesn't make sense. You're not generating wisdom. You're not practicing in the correct way. You're just crossing your legs and hoping for the best. This is not the way that we teach people. And if you're teaching people meditation these days or have that chance, don't teach them like this. All you're doing is you're consigning them to another lifetime in samsara. You want them to generate mind, focusing in the present moment, knowing and discerning every single moment. Know what's arising in mind, knowing what's there. What appears to be the self is the self nature of mind. But if we don't put effort into it, then it won't work. If we don't put effort into the present moment, irregardless of where we're at, then it won't work. before I came here today, I was talking to a younger attorney and her assistant, and she was presenting me with a case that she has that was very, very complex. But to me, because of my years of doing this, I was able to figure out how she could extricate her client from what appeared to be a bad situation. But it's the clarity of the mind, the calmness of it, the letting go of the ego to see the things and seeing because of this, which is what the Buddha is saying all the time, because of this. And so, and applying it in the present moment to what I'm doing, being an attorney, but yet the mind is in a state of Chan. It is able to see the things clearly and utilize whatever experiences are there to be able to come up and say, you know, they didn't do this, and because of this. And so in our lives, we're always presented with things. Some of them are very mundane, like being an attorney. Some of them are decisions, you know, shall I stay or shall I go, whatever the decisions you have to make, but you utilize the mind's own inherent wisdom to make those decisions. In everything that you do, whatever you say next, you have to stay awake to understand that the very thought that you have right now is going to determine the subsequent thoughts. Again, the Buddha is saying, because of this, because you thought that, then this is there. And so you're not surprised when these thoughts arise. You know exactly what it is because you, as the self-nature of mind, put it there. How could it be a surprise to you? Because as you awaken, what you're awakening to is how mind works. Causes and conditions never fail. So you're clear about it. And that is not something that is negative. A lot of times we talk about karma, and especially the Chinese always talk about ili, retribution. But you should not think of it just simply as retribution or payback. Oh, that's karma. You know, that person said that. Oh, they're going to have bad karma because they said that or they did that. You have to see it as how mind works. It works the other way too. The more positive you put in, the more it changes the mind. The less self you put in, this idea of a self-love, self-conceit, egocentrism, personality, life and being, the clearer mind gets, because mind then sees that everything that's appearing, everything is connected to a cause. And that cause is mind itself. And so that's why they're saying this empty apparition is created by this individual mind. Or what appears to be an individual mind, because when we have this idea of it, there's an idea that there is this individual mind that's causing this karma. But yet, that karma ultimately is non-existent. When we use wisdom in the right way, we see through that. When we sit to meditate, you have to be there not as something on the tip of your nose, but as if it's infinitely projected in all directions. Then you're doing meditation in the right way. When you're sitting and there's no locale, there's no viewpoint, it's just simply sitting in mind. No boundaries, infinite. Nothing to allow any thought to stick on, yet it's just as if you were looking, staring into the firmament, into the universe, Of course, there's thousands and thousands or billions of stars that you see, but they do not interfere with the space. They're perfectly in their place and all moving in accordance with causes and conditions. And everything that appears in mind is just like all of those stars in the firmament, all appearing. And as you begin to practice more and more, they will not appear to be stationary stars, but just simply some kind of a meteor passing by or a comet. They'll just be going so quickly and gone. Just arising, falling, arising, falling. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to count them. You don't have to name them. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to create a locale for mind. Where in fact would the locale of mind be? Just in this breath, in this moment, in this vision, irregardless whether it's sacred or profane, it's mine. When we understand this, then when we sit on the cushion, we have a fighting chance. Because when we're there, there's nothing to abide in, no viewpoint. Just sit. That's mochao. Just sit. You park the body. Shifu used to always say that. You give the body to the cushion and the mind to the method. What is the method? Inside illumination is just infinite. Step out of the way. See those notions of what we call self to be another comet going by. When we approach our practice in this way, it's true liberation. Because when we sit, we can sit. We're not worrying about the time. Time goes away. Space goes away. Of course, you still have sensations of the body that you will feel for a while. Eventually, they will go away. But it's natural when you sit there and you're sitting and your legs are sore because you don't do that every day. But it's okay. It too will pass. But it is the idea that when we sit, it's infinite. There's no locale. There's no place that you place your mind. And yet your mind is placed everywhere. It is why we talk about the 50 billion Buddha worlds on a single strand of hair. It can be this way, but in mind alone. If you say, oh, this is a creation of mind. Yes, it is, but it's an example of saying the potential of what mind is capable of doing. If mind can create this crappy samsara, it can certainly be capable of doing much better things. And that is our hope, is that we realize, and that's the positive aspect of it, of looking into mind and say, this will change. This is something that will change. And you know how to do it. How do you do it? It's all created by the mind. So when you see it in this way, you're clear about it, that it may take time, but think about this. You have all the time in the world. You can touch the pharaohs. You can touch the galaxies that will travel in 1,000 years, assuming we're still here on this planet, just simply in mind. There's no difference. You have all the time, but you make good use of it, understanding that still this body has a shelf date. that it will not be around for too long. But what you want to do is understand how mind works, understand how samsara works, the very appearance of a body here, which is illusory, comes from mind, but you understand how precious it is to have the potential to awaken. This Mani pearl, this wish-fulfilling gem that you have, if you had this pearl, what would you wish for? Another life? 2 more? You have that already. What would you wish for? $1 million? Well, I'm talking about when I was like 1950. I would say $30 billion. No. Would that be something? Eternal life? But the Buddha mind is clearly a treasury. We just don't understand that. So we measure things in terms of samsara. No. In the old days, if they gave somebody what appeared to be a silver dollar, they'd go and they'd bite into it to see if it was real. And that was their way of testing if it was real or not. We have to use our wisdom to test if things are real. We have to use our mind clearly, unhindered, to test the reality of things around us. And you know what? If we do that, we will see everything is created by the mind. Everything is transitory. Everything that you see is conditional. Everything that you are or think you are in your consciousness is transitory as well. You are not here. So if you look at the mall map and you see the little thing, it would say, you are not here. Huh? That's a surprise, you know. What do you mean I'm not here? But that's the way it is. Because you go, but I breathe, I eat, you know, I do all sorts of different functions. Yes, but it's all in an illusory world. And this talk has come from my frustrations in reading the sutras and even the Lankavatara Sutra and looking at things and seeing how they're written and going, how am I going to explain this to you? How am I going to do that? You know, you get it to a point where you can absorb it, but then to try to say, okay, how can I take them to this next level of the esoteric? And I can't. The only thing I can do is really exhort you to look into it and to practice. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about when we're, and I mean, I have so much stuff that I've read in preparing this, but this is part of the Lankavatara Sutra and section 28 and 82. And it reads this way. See if you can follow the bouncing ball with this. Mahamati Bodhisattva then asked the Buddha, in the sutras, the Bhagavan, meaning the Buddha, says that the Tathagata Garbha is intrinsically pure, endowed with 32 attributes, and present in the bodies of all beings. And that, like a priceless jewel wrapped in soiled clothing, the ever-present, unchanging Tathagata Garbha is likewise wrapped in the soiled clothing of the skandhas, dhatus, ayatanas, and stained with the stain of erroneous projections of greed, hatred, and delusion. And that is what the Buddhists teach. So then he says, how is it that the Bhagavan says that the Tathagata Garbha is the same as what followers of other paths, now he's talking about other religions, say about the self? Bhagavan, followers of the other paths also speak of immortal, creator, without attributes, omnipresent and indestructible. And they say this, Bhagavan is the self. So they're saying the Buddha is the self. So he's trying to show that Mahamati here is trying to show that Buddha Dharma is the same as all these other religions. The Buddha replied, Mahamati, the Tathagata Garbha of which I speak is not the same as the self mentioned in the followers of other paths. Mahamati, when I speak about the Tathagata Garbha, sometimes I call it emptiness, formlessness, intentionalness, realm of reality, Dharma nature, Dharma body, or nirvana. What is devoid of existence, what is devoid of self-existence, or what neither rises nor ceases, or original quiescence, or intrinsic nirvana, or similar expressions. One that's really good here is he's saying what is devoid of self-existence. So it's interesting, right? You go, but wait a minute, we were saying self-nature. Isn't that the same? Is it or isn't it? You have to walk through that door to find that out. It's very, very interesting. But how do I explain that to you? You try to explain that. We have people like Harry here as a teacher. These are not easy things to try to explain, much less the Lotus Sutra. But I mean, it's a challenge, right? And so then he says that, because he said similar expressions, but these are all words I've used in the past to describe mind. And it says, it is to put an end to the fear of foolish beings have about the expression no self, that the Tathagatas, Arhats, and fully enlightened ones proclaim the teaching of the Tathagata Garbha as projectionless realm devoid of attached to any view of self. So he's saying this is essentially to stop the baby from crying. Huh? So he says, Mahamati, bodhisattvas of the present and the future should not become attached to any view of a self. Don't attach to any view. The Tathagata Garbha is the cause of whatever is good or bad and is responsible for every form of existence everywhere. So it's responsible for every form of existence. So he's saying the Buddha womb is responsible for this. It is like an actor who changes appearances in different settings, but who lacks a self or what belongs to a self. Remember what Hongren was saying, you should not have personal possessions. He's saying that as well. This is where he got it from. Because this is not understood, followers of other paths unwittingly imagine an agent responsible for the effects that arise from the threefold combination of sensory faculty, object, and consciousness. So he's talking about the 18 realms here, but he's saying that they imagine an agent responsible for this. So in Christianity, who would that agent be? Anybody? Nobody. It's like you only have one choice here. In Christianity, who would that agent be? Nobody's going to say anything. I quit them. Really, nobody knows who the agent would be. Come on, somebody. Well, Jesus, somebody got it right. Well, even before Jesus, it would have been God, right? Gee, Maniz. Yeah, that's the agent that everybody says, well, it's God's will. You know.
So Gilbert Ryan, who responded, is our young friend from the 3-day retreat in LA.
Good job. So yeah, it's a simple one. I mean, you guys are overthinking this. You're really, really overthinking this, you know, from what we call the mouths of babes comes the answer. I mean, we picture whether it's Shiva or Jesus or whatever, but it isn't in this way. That's the distinction, is that other, let's say, I should say religions attribute things that are happening to somebody that's going, you die today, you win the lotto, you know, your car battery doesn't work, so you're going to be late for work. Oh my God, you know. And so all of these things are determined by a different source, not you, not even yourself, but this so-called higher being, an agent responsible for the effects that arise, or even they could say even the karma. So in some, like Hindu religion, they would believe in karma, but as an individual karma of the person. But remember that Master Ling Chi said he couldn't find karma, because correctly looking at it and saying that karma only exists if you presuppose that an individual would exist. When it is impregnated by habit energy from beginningless fabrications, it is known as a repository consciousness, Alaya Vijnana. Now he goes deep into Yogacara school here. And and gives birth to fundamental ignorance along with the 7 kinds of consciousness. So the 7 kinds of consciousness is your sense faculties, the part that puts this all together, and then the part that acts upon it, the 7th consciousness. And so when we see that, it's saying these are all, how do you say it? Gives birth to the fundamental ignorance along with the 7 consciousness. It is like an ocean whose waves rise without cease. But it transcends the misconceptions of impermanence or conceit of self, and is essentially pure and clear. Mahamati, although this repository consciousness of the Tathagata Garbha, seen by the minds of Shravakas or sound hearers and Pratyeka Buddhas, is essentially pure, because it is obscured by the dust of sensation. It appears to be impure, but not to the Tathagatas. So even if we see things and we see something that, let's say somebody murders somebody, is it pure or impure? It is seen as it is, and a product of cause and effect. So what they're doing here is they're jumping, and with this repository consciousness, they're saying that the 7 consciousness below essentially collapse. They have no permanence to them, and they're equating this Alaya Vijnana with mind itself. And so seeing the things in this way. The Yogacara school used this vehicle to explain that everything is what they call consciousness only or mind only, which is probably a better way to understand it than if we use consciousness, because a lot of times we refer to consciousness as there has to be an actor there to receive the consciousness. But if everything is mind only, it simply acts in accordance with causes and conditions. So anyway, that's why I say it's not easy to explain this, because we have to go a long way in terms of it. And here the Chan school was incorporating all these kinds of studies from Buddha nature to the Yogacara school, so to help define what the practice is. And all of this has to do with the practice. So when you sit to meditate, if you have right view, then you see the things in the proper way. And I get buried because I say you see the things. Mind perceives, but this perception of mind is not the perception from the five skandha. The five skandha says, if I hit myself on the head, I will feel pain. And I'll feel stupid for hitting myself on the head. I will not do it again. It goes through this whole process. Mind just says causes and conditions. You're not going to do that again, right? But here's where we start looking at what's self and what isn't. But we have to let go of the notion of self as it applies to samsara. That's what our problem is. That's why the Buddha said it's not self being not self of samsara self, not ego, not a personality or a life and being. That goes right back into the Diamond Sutra. But it's hard for us to do that because we can't separate from this notion that there is an agent that's doing it, whether it's a Buddha that's directing everything, or a purposely directing, or a self that's directing all of this, and having this idea of a duality. And that was the distinction in the Lankavatara Sutra from the part that I read, was that there isn't this agent. It is just that we see why things happen clearly in accordance with causes and conditions. You can do this in your daily life. You practice. You're mindful of what you say. You're mindful of what you do. Okay. You're careful. You measure your words. You measure your actions. You measure your thoughts. You're aware. This is non-conceptual awareness. It has nothing to do with, I better not say this or else people will think badly of me. That's still conceptual sleeping. But when it's non-conceptual, everything is this wu nian or wu wei. It just naturally functions. This is not easy to explain, but it will help you to have patience when you read higher level sutras or things that appear to be contradictory. You have to back it up and look at it and contemplate it. And then the esoteric aspect of what you're reading will be revealed. Not to you. It's always been there. You just never seen it. The you not being really you, but mind itself without the self. Okay, that'll give you plenty to work on. So I'll entertain questions. Only if they're entertaining.
Please raise your hands if you want to be unmuted.
Mina. Go ahead. Yeah.
What is volition? How does the volition relate to seventh and eighth consciousness?
Oh, this is a good question. Excellent question. The idea of volition, which, as we know, is one of the five skandha, this kind of an intention. If you remember when I was talking about what mind was or what it wasn't, and it was talking about intentionlessness, and a volition is just simply an appearance in mind. It's a creation. It's fundamentally empty, and it's devoid of any kind of an existence, a true existence, other than the fact that it belongs to mind and is created by mind. But there is no actor there. There's no ego that is setting it into motion. Although it's funny because it appears to be in motion, and so, but it isn't really. It kind of reminds me of those old like early photographs of a horse that was running, and they put it in a circle, and then they had a lamp that showed behind it, and as they twisted it, it appeared that the horse was moving. But in fact, all it was a projection of individual frames that gave the impression that there was movement there. And this volition is just the same way. It is acting on the projections of the minds and setting forth into motion new projections, but the volitions themselves are empty. It is definitely tied to samsara and the erroneous assumption that there is this duality that's there. In order to have intention, there has to be a false notion of a duality of an object and a subject. Mind doesn't have this. Mind functions impeccably without going through this kind of a process. That's why they say that it's wu yin, no thought, because it doesn't have an intention behind it. It just acts natural. So hopefully that explained it. If you have more question, please ask it, because it's a good question. That's it? Okay, good. Like I say, it's a good question because it's right germane to what we're talking about now. Okay, Eon, you appear again.
Here it is. So I have been asked to give a talk on mindfulness at a local church here in Columbus on the upcoming Sunday, just like the guest sermon giver. And I'm just trying to think about what it is that I have this opportunity that this might be the only time that I ever have a chance to speak to these individuals, to try to give them the best possible thing in that position, which, as I understand the Dharma, is right view. And so I'm trying to come up with ways to utilize the language that they are already familiar with, but sort of tweak the understanding. And, I'm where I'm at right now, just sort of understanding that a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. And so everything created by the mind, everything created by God. But the problem is that there is a whole set of baggage and attachment that comes along with those terms. And so am I going to end up as a wild fox spirit for trying to go down this lane? Is this blasphemous?
Well, the first thing I'd suggest is that you shave your beard.
Yeah, my wife's not cool with that.
And don't appear like a swami there. But what I do in those situations is I seek the common ground and seek verses from the Bible. For instance, if we talk about that, if seeds are sowed in the road, and other seeds are sowed in fertile ground, those that that are sowed in the fertile ground will give rise and will be generated, but those that are in the road will be of no value. So you use kind of things like that to say, you know, about karma and that you need to really know, you know, to put into practice, because Chan is all about practice, and be mindful in that. And what they think is mindfulness is tied to compassion, and our compassion for individuals, our compassion for the environment, our compassion for different things, and less of the idea of an individual self. That the Bible even says that the likelihood of a rich man going through to heaven is the same as a camel going through the eye of a needle. So, you know, use things of this nature to try to do that, you know, and so you, rather than you can use some of the Buddhist quotes, you know. I wouldn't be talking about Bhagavan or whatever, you know, they might go like that to you or whatever. But the thing is that if you speak to them in their language and with a sincere heart, it'll work. You'll do very, very good. Okay. But if you try to give them a Buddhist lesson 101, they may not be so receptible to that. But if you speak to them in common terms and wisdom, there's enough wisdom in the Bible for you to find that makes sense. And then you just kind of use the parallel analogies from Buddhist quotes and from the Bible itself. And so that you see the things, you know, clearly in terms of what's there and how you look at things. I mean, you know, rendering onto Caesar what is Caesar's and using that to kind of tie into things, you know. Actually, I could have been a really good pastor. So see me next week. You mail in your donations right now. Okay. But anyway, that's how I would do it. And it's effective. It works because it takes away the idea of that you're discriminating in any way. So if they ask you about the Buddha, you know, you can ask about it, and, you know, and you can say it, but in a way where it doesn't, you're not like going like, the Buddha can beat up Jesus any day. You know, that kind of stuff is not going to get you very far. So you just remain very, very humble, you know, with everything. And after they pray over you, then you can go, okay, for your eternal soul. Okay. So anyway, that's what I would do. Best of luck. Beyond. Okay. Harry.
Yes, hi.
Hey, Harry.
I'm referring to the sutra that you just read, the passage on 241, you know, in 82, where it talks about the Tathagata Garbha, and it's the cause of whatever is good or bad, and it changes its appearance. Then in the next paragraph, it says, when it is impregnated by the habit energy of beginningless fabrications, it's known as the repository consciousness, which makes it sound like it's still the Tathagata Garbha, and it's just people are confused, so that we're giving it a new name. But then it says, and gives birth to fundamental ignorance, making it sound like something is produced. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think it's a problem with language. You know, an analogy is like you're in an airport with a map, and then someone takes the map away from you. The airport hasn't really changed, but you're totally confused because you can't recognize anything. But I don't think the Tathagata Garbha actually changes as such. So so my quibble is with the giving birth. So am I just getting caught up in the language, or is there, you know, how do you?
I think you're getting caught up in the birthing process.
Yeah, I'm not a birther though, believe me.
But the thing is that you know, in this one, it makes sense. But again, the esoteric is very, very deep there. It's very, very deep.
Mhm.
And you've got to go long on this one. Okay. You just go, I was going to say the Hail Mary pass, but I may be wrong religion. But it makes sense. I read that and it came through clearly to me, but not on the first reading. So I know what you're doing. You're looking at it sincerely, but there's a clue there. It's not a mistake in the translation. This is Red Pine's translation,
Right.
which is better than Suzuki's translation by a long shot. So if anybody wants to read that, they should get Red Pine's version of it. It's just a further down the road years and oh, there she's got it right there. So anyway, it's a one that is worth looking at. But it is because it is all connected. It's all there. That's the weird one. That's kind of like Michael's not here. I wish there's like a particle that's like a weird particle of matter that exists but doesn't exist, and it's kind of like that. I wish he was here, he could explain that, but it's kind of an interesting concept that it is and it isn't, but it is. We don't negate it, but we don't say, yeah, this is it. It is birthed by mind itself, but it comes in a very strange way. Hold on, let me see if I can see that, because you picked up on something really good, and this is my exact point in terms of saying, how do you explain these things? I mean, they're not easy, and this what I was talking about was because it says, and gives birth to fundamental ignorance along with the 7 kinds of consciousness. All of those things are there. They belong to mind. They're created by mind. They're birthed in mind. They're born in mind. And so it's interesting. You have to reverse the way that you look at it and see if that works. And then
so it's a birth. It's not a birth.
yeah, it's very interesting because it goes away from saying it is and it isn't. It is just seeing the thusness of mind. If you read it as a thusness of mind, it is within the totality of mind without there being a totality. That's why they talk about it as infinite, because the totality would presuppose that it contains everything, but it creates everything. So it's an interesting thing. And that's exactly what was my point. It's not so easy to explain this. Even now, probably a lot of people listening to us don't understand what I'm saying to you. Okay. And that was my dilemma in terms of trying to read the Lankavatara Sutra to them and simply not just reading it verbatim, but showing, okay, that these things are all connected. But it's fascinating puzzle. There, a conundrum that's there, and the puzzle is solved by not solving the puzzle. It's opposite, and then there's no puzzle, but it's still there, and the mind gives birth to that puzzle.
So the duck is the duck is out of the bottle. You know that koan. How do you get the duck out of the bottle?
Yeah, the goose. Yeah,
The goose,
and
yeah.
you simply just let it go, and that's the point. So I mean, you're using that analogy, and it's a good analogy. I mean, this is tough stuff, guys. I mean, this is like very, very deep, the things that are talking about, the thing that Mina talked about, how do we fit volition into all of this? If there's no self, or is there self? And this is something that the people from the Washington retreat are going to get a whole dose of from different viewpoints. It's something very interesting that I started looking at this and going, how do we talk about self and not self and self nature of mind? How do we do that? How do we fit all that stuff in? And it's not easy. This is good stuff. I mean, this is the stuff that can produce awakenings in people if they're sincere about it. I mean, you went right to it and looked at it and went, huh? What is it? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, you're right. But then you're just a phantasm of mind, so who the hell cares? But in any case, it's in that way. Yes, Jing. And mute Jing. She's working on it. Go ahead.
Hi, Gilbert. I have a very basic question. What does Chan practice include?
Chan practice is always the investigation of mind. Investigation of mind is that we use every moment to investigate how mind works. And I think that's the difference in terms of this. To really practice Chan, one has to look into how mind works, not the appearances and not attainment of anything, but the very practice of how mind works is what brings a realization or an awakening. Because as we're looking at it, then we no longer are looking at it from the viewpoint of an ego or personality, but we're looking at why are things appearing. And so that very action then negates the idea that there is what the Lanka was saying, that there's an actor that's involved in it. So as we're looking at it and you see every moment, it's so wonderful. You just look, and you see somebody doing something. Sometimes you can see the instant karma, or you can see if somebody says something, the sour looks on people's faces, but the person who said it is oblivious to the reaction that they got, because they're so caught up in their ego, they can't see it. And you see all of these things, or you see in a simple smile when you go by somebody that they smile back at you. It's very interesting, causes and condition, but you understand that simple smile that you do with them, you are interlocking with that person for lifetime after lifetime to produce a result, a better result. But this is how you do it. You don't think of just this lifetime. You look at to open the possibilities, because everything's created by the mind. So when you're kind to people, it gets paid back. There's positive results. This is how we use Chan. It's a very, very positive, very beautiful practice, wonderful practice, and it's artistic. It's artistic because we being mind itself are creators. So wouldn't you want to create a better world than we're in right now? We could do that. We create the environment around us. We start with creating the environment around us and then work out from there. That's Chan. Okay. Very basic question, very good question. It's not about any kind of heady mental philosophy or anything else. It's just, how does mind work? So you don't have to be a genius or a philosopher or have a doctorate in any Buddhist studies. You just apply it moment to moment. Okay. You won't be far off with using it that way. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, David.
Oh, thank you, Gilbert. I wanted to ask about the practice, and my question is, can self-nature be used to practice? As opposed to, say, self?
I don't know, David. You always come to me with these questions that you paint yourself into a corner and you want me to pull you out. I'm being kind to you. I mean, but I'm pointing out the nature of the problem with the questions that you present is it presupposes that there's an illusory self and then there's a self nature, and that the self nature practices itself. The self nature is just thus. There's no ego there. That's where you're getting trapped. And that's where you paint yourself into a corner, because you can't get out of that corner without giving up the self. But that's what you have to do. You have to give up the self, whether it's self nature or mind or self. That's why I was saying what I was saying today, is that one has to step in that doorway of Chan. And in that doorway, it's Wu Wei or Wu Nian, no thought. It's just this path, this empty path that is there. There's no person, no life and being, no ego, whether one sees it as an illusory self or an exalted self of self nature of mind. Don't put self nature of mind in that category. Every time you do that, you're taking a step back.
Okay.
Okay. That's why I say that I'm real patient with you, because you ask questions, and your questions are questions that people that don't have any shame ask. I'm kidding you. What I'm saying is that you ask the questions freely and fearlessly, which is good. And that's important, that if you think about it, then you're not going to ask. Like, Jesus, I mean, that was such a clear one, but nobody wanted to press the button on that. It was like, we're on Jeopardy and 20 minutes go by and nobody pushes the button. And it had to take the young one, I think he's 16 years old, to answer that question, to have no fear to do that. But you're in that, you would have been that way when you were younger, so you still, what I call dare to eat a peach, ask the questions, and there's no stupid questions here, whether it's Jing's question or Mina's question or Harry's. I mean, all of those are working towards the practice, and they're all beneficial to us all here. There's no level. Okay. So anyway, that's my answer to you.
Okay. I was going to ask a second one, but I'm not going to bother on that. So I'll pass. It was even more ridiculous, the second one. So
the masters would say, what, you want another cup of slop?
yeah, no, I'm full.
It's all right. Like, again, you can ask your questions, and I really want you to ask your questions, because some people don't have. Robert used to do that all the time. I don't know what happened to him. I think the parrot cut out his tongue or whatever, but we need people to ask those questions like that, or Jing's questions. Those are important to keep this, like, so that it's not just for so-called advanced people or high level. There's no level here. Okay, good. Any other questions? We still have 3 minutes if anybody has a question. No question. So Sue, congratulations. I'm assuming that everything went well on your son's wedding. You can unmute her. Her son just got married last Saturday. And so before that, she was telling me the trials and tribulations of wedding plans, where people that are supposed to do things decide that they're not going to show up to do the things they're supposed to do. And her karma of finding somebody to cover it in a short period of time is very amazing. So she had good karma to do that. So everything went well?
Yes.
All right.
It was a very nice wedding, beautiful wedding.
Yeah.
We had a morning, kind of like Buddhists, we invite monks come to give the newlywed blessing, and the whole Cambodian tradition is started from 8:30 and at 2:30. Maybe sort of like a Indian wedding, for
Well,
3 days.
We
But
do
this-
that in the Mexican weddings, but we end at 2:30 a.m.
No, 2:30 p.m. Then start receptions.
Yeah.
6 p.m. until almost midnight.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not bad. Then,
It was a long day.
yeah, because I thought Cambodians would party more. So I guess they do. So that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very happy everything went well for you. So I was sending the blessings. Please, no, nothing bad happened to that and to the marriage itself. So that's good.
Thank you.
Do that. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for today. So we'll see what happens next week. Always a surprise. Today I wanted to give you one that wasn't so based on scripture, but just on talking. I hadn't done one like this for a while to try to tie together what you've been learning, and hopefully that helped rather than confuse you. And the topic, even what I was saying, is not an easy one. So if you lost a place every once in a while, it's okay. Don't be so critical on yourself. It will come in due time. But you can see even people like Harry looking at it, there's different versions and how he's seeing it. And so I'm so happy, because he actually pointed out what I was trying to get to, that it's not so easy, and even sometimes when we read, we may think that there's a mistake there, but it's not. And even the first time I read it the way that Harry read it. And then I went back and looked at it and contemplated it. And that's sometimes what you have to do. Our practice is one of just investigation of the mind. So keep at it. We will see you when we see you. Some of you, I'll see you very soon. So take care. Good night, good morning, wherever you're at.